For hundreds of years, we have been pumping harmful chemicals up into our atmosphere without thinking about what it will do to our one-of-a-kind planet. These pollutants, such as carbon dioxide and methane, go up into our atmosphere, causing climate change, which threatens the lives of countless people. Usually, how the Earth works is that sunlight goes through the atmosphere and the heat is absorbed by the Earth, with some of the heat being sent back out into space. However, some of that does not get sent back into space and is instead reflected back onto the Earth. This natural effect is called the greenhouse effect, and without it, life on Earth would most likely not exist. However, humans use resources that introduce harmful things into our atmosphere, making the greenhouse effect greater than it is in the natural world. We release carbon dioxide to get to work and create power. We release methane due to our livestock. All these particles go up into the atmosphere, reflecting more and more heat back onto the Earth instead of releasing it into space as it should. The result of this is climate change and global warming, and they have dire consequences on our civilization. Over 90% of the sun's heat that is given to the Earth gets absorbed by oceans. The rising temperature of our planet due to carbon emissions is raising ocean temperature and is melting polar ice caps in Greenland and Antarctica. The world's average temperature has gone up so far, and as a result of the temperatures of the oceans, Greenland has already melted more than what we thought the worst case scenario was from 60 years ago. And the melt rates are still growing, and it's showing no signs of slowing down or stopping. Greenland is not the only place that is rapidly getting smaller due to climate change. So is Antarctica and the rest of the world. Antarctica is disappearing at an astonishing and terrifying rate. It is melting at more than 1 kilometer a year, and it's still speeding up. Soon, the entirety of West Antarctica will be gone, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. All of this melting of ice will remap the world as we know it. As the oceans heat up and the ice caps melt, the water molecules will get warmer, and when things get warmer, they expand, creating much higher sea levels. In fact, the sea levels have already risen 8 inches since 1900, and sea level rise is continuing to get faster. From 1900 to 1990, the sea level rose 1.2 millimeters a year, but in just 2016, the sea level rose to 2.4 millimeters. This is not a natural cycle like some people believe. We have measured the sea level for a long time, and for the 2,000 years before the 18th century, the sea level had barely risen at all. After West Antarctica melts, conservative estimates for sea level rise is an additional meter to what they already are, and that will have devastating effects. This sea level rise will cause mass destruction all over the world. The Netherlands and a vast amount of the United States will be underwater. Places like New York City, Florida, Venice, and California will soon all be underwater, and there is now nothing we can do to prevent that from happening. Already, the Netherlands has invested $2.5 billion into enormous seawalls the length of 2 Eiffel Towers laying sideways. This is needed to stop the country from going underwater, and soon the United States will have to do the same. If you go to Miami, Florida today, you will see water splashing over the sides of walls and streets flooded, and all of this is because of climate change and rising sea levels. When Western Antarctica melts, the majority of Miami will be flooded, causing an estimated $145 billion in property damage, and 300,000 homes will be destroyed and will have to be evacuated forever. However, that is the best case scenario. If sea levels continue to rise at their current rate, it will cause over $500 billion just in property damage in Miami. This does not include all the other parts of Florida and all the other parts of the United States that will be flooded as well. Just in Miami, 1.4 million homes will be destroyed and will have to be evacuated. So far, Miami has invested $500 million in pumps and drainage to try to combat the constant flooding that it has to endure due to rising sea levels. But soon, New York City will have to do the same, threatening countless amount of jobs. As a result of rising sea levels, New York City will be flooded. Manhattan will no longer be the busy and productive place it is now, and everything about it will change. However, rising sea levels are not the only things affected by climate change. So are historic places like Venice that will soon slip underneath the murky oceans if we don't do something. Every day, store owners and residents in Venice have to combat the ever-rising tides as their homes and businesses get flooded daily due to the rising sea level and tide. When you walk into a bookstore in Venice, you see all the books in bathtubs because if they would get soaked by the tide twice a day. You see sandbags behind people's doors trying to keep the water from surging through the front door. Venice is not sinking, it's drowning. To try to combat this, they've developed an elaborate system to keep high tides out of the city. Project Moose is a complex system of gates located at all the inlets of the lagoon that Venice is in. When tides get too high, air is pushed into the gates, raising them to keep water out, which protects the city and the wildlife in the lagoon. The project took $6.3 billion to construct, and this is just blocking off a few entrances into a lagoon. Imagine the cost it would take to keep New York City, Florida, and California safe from the rising oceans. However, it's not just major cities that are being affected. Rising sea levels have already impacted Bangladesh, and things seem to keep getting worse. People used to live in villages right along the sea line, but now they have to keep moving back. Where they used to farm, they now have to live as their old stomping grounds is now underwater. This creates an extreme lack of food as they now have no more land to farm on. They can see the ocean slowly chipping away at the ground, getting closer and closer. However, they are not the only ones that have to keep moving further and further inland. So do the animals, such as tigers, who are losing their habitat and have to get closer and closer to humans to survive. To try to combat this, people are now moving to cities in Bangladesh, which creates many problems as the population is now growing in these cities at a tremendous rate. Many of these people have never lived in urban environments before, meaning that they do not have the skills to get jobs, which leads to starvation and poverty. Sea level rise is going to remap the world, and there is no longer anything we can do to stop it. While we as well as many animals are losing habitat, there is one thing benefiting from all of this: mosquitoes. With more water, they can now breed more efficiently and faster than ever. Because of warmer weather, they can now survive for longer, possibly year-round, giving us more diseases like the West Nile virus and Zika. This means we had to spend more money combating these diseases. The sea level is expected to rise 6 meters. This will have catastrophic effects on our planets. We will have to remap the world. However, this is the best case scenario. Rising sea levels are not the only threat that raising ocean temperatures offers, but also increased number of storms. When hurricanes form, they thrive off of warm water, and the water is getting warmer, which means greater and more deadly hurricanes. When testing this hypothesis in state-of-the-art simulations, they found that there is an 11% increase in wind speed and a 20% increase in rainfall. It also showed that there will be an 87% increase in Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes. That potentially means that there will be an 87% increase in storms worse than Hurricane Katrina, which killed 1,833 people and made $80 billion in damages. However, that is just data based off of rising sea temperatures. That does not take into account that there is more water for hurricanes to travel on, since a lot of the US will be underwater, meaning that hurricanes will have more time and more distance to get even more deadly. The increased amount of carbon in the air is not just warming the ocean, but slowly turning it acidic. This kills ocean life and makes fishing increasingly harder and makes it difficult for coral reefs to form and grow. Coral reefs are an essential part of the ocean's ecosystem. It provides shelter for countless marine organisms and keeps nitrogen levels balanced. However, coral reefs also protect coastal cities from storms and high tides. So not only are storms becoming more frequent and more powerful, but our protection that we have against them is being destroyed, making the damage much more intensive. However, it is not just saltwater that is being affected by climate change. Groundwater is acting differently now due to changing weather conditions as a result of climate change. Groundwater is moving to different places, drying up people's wells and flooding towns. This is due to participation happening in different areas of the world. Countless people and organisms use groundwater for fresh water, but all of that is changing now. Where there used to be water, there is only dryness, but that water has to go somewhere. The earth is getting really hot, which makes evaporation happen much faster, so all the moisture is taken out of the ground. Instead, groundwater is going to places like Nevada, Georgia, and South Carolina, where there is projected to be a 45% increase in groundwater, which results in massive flooding. This increase would cause South Carolina to get 12 inches more rain than Seattle, Washington. All this flooding would come at a cost. Assuming that the average cost of repair for flooding per house is $4,000, the total amount of people per household is about 2.58 people. That would mean that we would have to cough up $29 billion in damages, and that is just taking into account homes, not hotels, businesses, and museums. Also, this would not be a one-time payment. We would have to continue to pay this every time those states get flooded, which would be at least yearly. Some models show that there will be an increase in tornadoes, and that they will definitely increase in the amount and strength of hurricanes and typhoons. Tornadoes have increased in frequency and strength significantly since 1950. Studies show that climate change increases CAPE, which is what causes severe thunderstorms, which kills 80 people a year and injures 300 a year, and those numbers will increase as a result of climate change. Because wind speed will increase as a result of climate change, so will the amount of hailstorms, as wind plays a crucial role in causing them, causing more damage. Climate change also increases the number of wildfires, as everything dries up much quicker due to rising temperatures. There has been a significant increase in the number of wildfires since 1980, and there is a clear and direct correlation between the increasing spring and summer temperatures and earlier snowmelt. These fires are becoming so frequent and severe that we are now spending over $1 billion annually firefighting. Every year, approximately 339,000 deaths are a result of fires, and this number will continue to rise. This year, 2018, we had an all-time high for the number of wildfires and the extent of the damage. The 37,718 wildfires that burned 4.8 million acres of land caused $2.4 billion in suspension costs, which is causing a financial crisis within the government, as firefighting costs continue to go billions over budget, and those costs continue to rise. Simulations show that soon deaths by wildfire will become more than doubled and the costs will follow suit. And the worst part is that the more wildfires we get, the more our planet will heat up, as carbon monoxide is released during forest fires, making an impact on the greenhouse effect, warming up the planet even more, which then results in even more forest fires. Storms and forest fires decrease population wealth as it increases productivity, and money is spent to repair damage or snow. All of these things will increase as our planet continues to warm, making the economy worse, and the future of mankind is unclear. Climate change is also rapidly getting rid of habitat for animals. Like said earlier, rising temperatures are melting polar ice caps, Antarctica, and Greenland. This is habitat for tons of animals like polar bears, penguins, and seals. Without these places, these animals would go extinct, and that would be very sad. However, also narwhals, the unicorns of the sea, are affected by this. As the ice melts, it moves around sometimes, impaling or trapping narwhals, leaving them to die. Climate change also causes swing temperatures, meaning that a narwhal could go through an ice tunnel, only to find that it cannot get back up because it's now frozen due to flash freezing. This makes them incredibly vulnerable to hunters and can prevent them from going back to the surface to get oxygen. Narwhals are crucial to the health of the Arctic Ocean, as they are on top of the food chain, and if they die off, then the whole ecosystem will be changed forever. Narwhals take shelter, feed, and take refuge using ice, and if that goes away, so will narwhals. Another crucial animal that is being affected by climate change are leatherback sea turtles. Leatherback sea turtles play a crucial role in marine life. They maintain coral reefs by bringing nutrients from and back to the ocean. Coral reefs support tons of life, and without them, many species would not be able to survive. Unfortunately, due to climate change, more massive storms are being formed frequently, washing away their nests, making it increasingly hard for them to reproduce. Turtles and many other reptiles do not determine sex as mammals do. They do not have X and Y chromosomes. Instead, the sex is determined when they are eggs. If there is not much heat, then it will be male, but if there is more heat, then it will be a female. Due to the increasing global temperatures, there will soon only be female turtles, meaning that it will be impossible to reproduce. This has already happened in a northern Australian feeding ground where 99% of the turtle population is female, and once this spreads to the rest of the world due to rising temperatures, turtles will soon be extinct, along with many other vital reptiles. Koalas are also going to be impacted by climate change, as they only eat one thing, which is the leaves of the eucalyptus tree. As more carbon dioxide is being pumped into the air, it's turning the leaves of the tree poisonous, either killing the koalas or starving them. As stated before, as ice melts, sea levels rise, taking away land and habitat from animals, meaning they have less to eat, and they have to be closer to us. This is killing off countless amount of animals. As animals are searching for new areas to live due to the decrease of land due to rising sea levels, they are having to move further north to escape the heat. They bring with them diseases that pose a threat to us, meaning that we will have to spend more money on developing new drugs and having to be continually combating diseases at a higher rate than ever. Right now, 6 out of every 10 infectious diseases in the world are caused by wildlife, and this number will increase due to animals having to migrate, bringing foreign diseases with them, and us having to be in close range due to global temperature rising and rising sea levels, causing a loss of habitat. Due to changing weather conditions brought by climate change, many people are now without water, especially in Africa. Lakes and rivers are drying up all across Africa, and all of this is due to faster evaporation as a result of global warming and changing weather patterns, making it rain in different places. An example of this is Lake Victoria, which has over 200 million people relying on it for fresh water, countless amounts of animals. Water is being evaporated from Lake Victoria faster than it is being put back in, meaning that it is drying up. Just a change of 1 degree will have terrible consequences for Africa's water supply. The southern Cape of Africa used to get regular rainfall, but now they have the lowest amount of rainfall in 130 years. Now, entire towns are without water. People are fighting over resources. Lots of people are dying. There is now a lot of conflict between animals and humans as they are fighting over a limited amount of water that is in Africa. Lake Victoria gives water to countless people, and it is a significant resource in Africa, and it is a primary source for the River Nile. Many people's lives are around this lake to get drinking water or take a bath, to make money, to eat. Without this, countless amount of lives are going to be affected. Lake Victoria is expected to disappear in 10 years, and so will those people's lives, their families, and the future generations. The loss of this lake will also get rid of the longest river in the world that goes through 9 countries. Due to climate change, there will be significant loss of industry. Like stated before, climate change is causing sea level to rise, destroying coastal cities like New York City, Miami, and parts of California. But this also has vast impact on agriculture. Agriculture contributes approximately $2.3 trillion to the U.S. economy annually, and U.S. farms produce about 25% of all the grains in the world. But that will soon change. Higher temperatures cause faster evaporation, which means that we will have to put more water on crops more frequently from an already minimal water source. This means we will have to spend much more money growing crops, reducing profit margins. Additionally, weeds and parasites thrive in warmer climates, meaning that we will have to spend more money on pesticides and weeding. However, climate change will also affect livestock. Rising temperatures can result in heat stress on livestock. This can create complications with animals such as increased vulnerability to disease, lower fertility rates, and reduction of milk production. Climate change also causes drought, which means that there will be fewer places livestock can graze, meaning more will die. On top of all this, with higher temperatures, diseases and parasites can survive longer due to warmer winters, meaning that they can now evolve to hurt cattle even more and affect them all year long. Fisheries contribute $1.55 billion to the economy every year. However, changes in water temperature due to the changing of the timing and reproduction of the migration of fish will mean that it will be much harder to catch them, decreasing profit margins. Due to the rising acidity of the water, this causes fish to get sick or die. However, food is not the only industry being affected by climate change. So will the tourism industry. Once the sea level rises, Florida will be uninhabitable. So will New York City, which means no more trips to any of these places. Also, fewer people will want to visit Alaska due to the disappearance of glaciers. Just like the polar ice caps, global warming poses a serious threat to them, and they are slowly melting and retreating. Glaciers are retreating faster than they ever have before, or faster than we ever thought they would, with the Marinelli Glacier in Chile retreating more in the past 10 years than in an entire century. If you see what these places look like today versus what they looked like 10 years ago, you can hardly tell that they're the same place. Also, soon there will be no more glaciers left in Glacier National Park. Glaciers are essential to many ecosystems, as they offer steady year-round supply of fresh, clean water for animals and humans. Glaciers naturally melt to give off fresh water, but they are now melting alarmingly fast. Once the glaciers melt, there will only be fresh water available during the springtime. But when the snowmelt is gone, countless amount of lives will have no water. We now have warmed the planet so much that there is nothing we can do to stop the polar ice caps from melting and cities to be flooded. Countless amount of lives are going to be affected, whether that be from drought, flooding, loss of habitat, storms, fires, or loss of a job. We could have prevented all of this. People have known about climate change for a long time, back when we could have done something about it, and those people are the scientists at ExxonMobil.
Scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate.
ExxonMobil had their scientists looking into climate change before anyone else, and as a result, they knew it was happening before anyone. They knew about the significant consequences it would have on our planet, but they didn't care. They ran ad campaigns that looked like scientific papers to say that climate change was not happening. They knew about climate change back when we still could have done something about it. The things they said are very similar to what other companies have said in the past.
I think there's a great deal of doubt as to whether or not cigarettes are harmful.
Why do 98% of smokers never get anything? That's an interesting question. Or why do non-smokers get lung cancer? Does it all add up to the fact that we don't know and nobody knows?
We don't see the data that backs up the public claims that global warming is occurring.
Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Please. Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's good for you.
Oil companies like ExxonMobil are saying nearly identical things to what big tobacco companies said about the risk of smoking. Cigarette companies knew about the dangers of smoking, but said that there weren't any, or that the data was unclear. The same thing that oil companies are saying now. In fact, many of the people who helped big tobacco companies are now speaking on behalf of oil companies.
I still think that the EPA has cooked the data on secondhand smoke.
They fund events where climate change deniers get together to voice their opinion. They pay scientists to speak there. Dr. Willie Soon was given $1.2 million by ExxonMobil. He denies that the money had any impact on his work. What big tobacco companies were doing was illegal, and they got hefty fines after it. Now we are targeting big oil companies with 3 states' district attorneys that have launched investigations, and with 15 more states following suit. All of this is a significant problem, but there are still many people who do not believe that climate change is human-caused, or that it's happening at all.
You know, Obama said the biggest problem we have is global warming. And by the way, it's supposed to be 70 degrees today. It's freezing here. Speaking of global warming, we need some global warming.
Anybody that tells you they've got this figured out is not being truthful with you. There are too many complexities around climate science for anybody to fully understand all of the cause and effects and the consequences of what you may choose to do to attempt to affect that.
97% of climate scientists say we are experiencing global climate change. I don't know.
There's no such survey.
There is. It's National Academy of Sciences.
This is absolutely absurd, as there is a clear connection between humans and climate change. Although that it is true that climate change happens naturally due to ocean currents and Milankovitch cycles, there has never been this much change in millions of years. We can see temperatures from Earth many years before humans ever existed, by extracting ice and sampling the air bubbles trapped within. Using this like rings on a tree, we can count back the years and see the carbon concentration in the air at the time and estimate the temperatures. And it's clear that as we started using fossil fuels, the temperature has gone up too. You can even see significant parts of history, such as wars, with these records. Measure sea level rise. We use 2 gray satellites, which measure gravimetric data, which is super accurate. Before 2002, we used tide gauges. All this equipment is very precise and clearly shows sea level rise. People like Trump somehow don't understand climate change, and so do a lot of people. This may be because President Trump's former Secretary of State is a former CEO of ExxonMobil and is working to reverse the laws that will help the environment. He is destroying countless lives to make more money, and so are a lot of other people at Trump's control. His cabinet is full of climate change deniers, and he now has people that don't believe in climate change in every branch of the government. There is now nothing we can do to stop climate change. We have already done too much damage. All the carbon dioxide and methane we have put up into the air is making the greenhouse effect worse than ever, warming the environment, which causes polar ice caps to melt and the water to heat up, making it expand, causing sea level rise, which will remap the world. Storms are more deadly and frequent than ever, and wildfires surge across the world. Businesses and homes and cities are going to be destroyed due to rising temperatures. Habitat is being lost and natural wonders are being destroyed. There may not be anything we can do to prevent that, but we can prevent it from getting worse. We could switch to renewable energy. To switch the entirety of the US's power grid will cost an estimated $12 trillion. This sounds like a lot, but it would just take 14 years to accomplish. If we took half the annual military budget and devoted it to switching to renewable energy, that would be doing the world a huge favor. Even if we do this, we would still have the biggest military budget, nearly 3 times the size of the next largest one. This would have a significant impact on the environment and help future generations. Renewable energy can consist of solar panels, windmills, and hydroelectric plants. Many people think that these are not reliable sources of energy, but they are. A company ran a simulation trying to run the entire world's power needs off of 100% renewable energy, keeping the grid stable every 30 seconds for 6 years, and it worked. Even if the sun's not shining, we can still get power from solar panels. During the day, when the sun's rays hit the solar panels, it generates heat, which is then collected and stored for later. When additional power is needed, the heat captured gets sent into tubes where the water is turned into steam, where a traditional steam turbine is ran. Another way is with windmills. When a windmill is creating more power than is needed, it powers a pump that pumps water up a hill. When additional power is needed, it releases the water back down the hill, which turns the turbine, creating electricity. Although this seems hard, it would not take much time to make this happen, but it needs to happen. In order to keep the planet from rising another half of a degree, we need to switch to 80% clean energy by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And this plan would only take 14 years. As the second largest polluter in the world, in a first world country with the money and resources to do so, we need to take a stand to prevent climate change from getting any worse. We owe it to the millions who will go hungry, thirsty, or be killed by storms, to the countless species that are suffering, losing habitat and going extinct due to our reckless actions, and all that will lose jobs, and the cities that will be destroyed by climate change, and the future generations. People are dying of thirst in Africa due to changing weather conditions. Species are becoming extinct due to the loss of habitat, and rising sea levels are going to remap the earth and destroy cities, all while people profit off the world's destruction. We have to solve climate change before it destroys our home. The whole world is at stake, and we are the only ones with the means to save it.